Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, any time it is, wherever you are. My name is Aneesh de Vos, and we have, apart from our guest, we have the most wonderful, the most gorgeous, and apparently David is upgraded. We shouldn't lose him today. He shouldn't freeze. We'll poke him if he looks as if he is. But enough of you, David, with your upgrade. Let's go to Frankie Larkin. Frankie Larkin, when I said to him, how would you like to be introduced? He said, I don't know. So I'm going to introduce him in my way. I read a blog of Frankie's on a website of a training company called Epione Training, who are a brilliant, brilliant company. And the blog is called See Me, Hear Me blog, and it's about trauma. So of course I jotted in there and said, hello, Frankie, come and chat to us. And Frankie's blog, and he said yes, and Frankie's blog was, there's a place in the soul where you've never been wounded. Frankie.
Yes.
What led you to write that incredibly beautiful blog, which had me in tears? I sent it over to David. And David?
Yes, I'm inclined to agree. It was moving, yes, to say the least. Yeah.
Yes. So what was it, Frankie? You talk of rescuing hugs. You talk, and now I'm going to get choked. The dark night of the soul, and you came through that. I'd love to know.
Yeah. Well, it's a huge topic, you know, for discussion. The dark night of the soul, as you can imagine, has been debated for centuries. The rescuing hug, and there's a place in the soul where you've never been wounded. Came from a time in my life where I was suffering from chronic depression for about 12 years. But prior to that, there was a lot of stuff going on in my life that I wasn't happy with, and I wasn't content, if you like. And the whole thing about I believe I can only speak for my personal experience. I don't speak for anyone else here. It's my personal experience, and I didn't come from a scientific background. I didn't come from an academic or intellectual background. I was a blank canvas. I had nothing, no ability to even communicate, as you read in the blog, at any level whatsoever. And I was encouraged to go to a prayer meeting. I was at the end of my terror. I was on the edge of suicide, and I was asked to go to a meeting one night in a church, and I went, and reluctantly went. And that night, when I walked in the door, I was given a hug by a woman who didn't even ask my name, didn't ask anything about me, just gave me a hug and said, welcome. And in that moment, something happened. Now, it wasn't a massive shift. It wasn't ecstatic. It wasn't high. There was nothing. It was very, very calm, very level. And then there was a celebration mass, and there was talking and chatting, etc. But I was still quite afraid that night of what could happen, or what was about to happen, or just very insecure. Yeah. And by the end of the night, I knew something had happened or taken place, but I didn't know what. It was a kind of a stillness started to come upon me, and probably within about 3 days, every single piece of shame that I ever felt about myself had dissolved.
Wow.
So but in hindsight, I can look back and say this was a mystical experience. Now, there's a difference between mystical experiences and being a mystic. Okay, I believe that every human being experiences mystical experiences in an ordinary way in every single day of their lives. But until we recognise it in a conscious level, then it can be missed or overlooked. So that led me on a path to investigate. So I got really enthusiastic and vibrant because I had a huge somatic impact on my life after that. And I was actually writing about it the other day, just jotting down a diary. and the first things that started to go, I started to see colour in my face, and I started to see a shine in my hair and aliveness in my hair. The gut-wrenching feelings in my tummy when I ate disappeared within about 3 or 4 days. I could see a blueness in my eyes again. So all the somatic, physiological change was very, very clear to see, albeit then I didn't know that's what it was, because I didn't even know what the word somatic meant. You know, so it was, this is only in hindsight when I look back and say, oh my goodness, this was a really, really cathartic experience for me that night, and didn't even realise it. It was so gentle, it was so natural, it came as an everyday experience, and that's how I believe that mystical experiences or events are very ordinary.
Mm-hmm.
And we make out that they're very massive, and they're not. They're very ordinary every day. And that's why at the end of the blog I felt I had to write, these spiritual experiences are found in the nitty-gritty life of everyday life. You know, it's not something that we go into a corner and pray, then we get blessed, or we get this anointing or whatever. No, to me it was nothing like that. Mm. So enthusiasm really, really led me to be, I get so vibrant and so fervent towards God. And I thought this thing now, God got very interesting. This God concept really got interesting, and I followed that path for about four years within charismatic renewal. It was very at its peak then, and I felt that was lovely. And I met a lot of new friends, relationships that I had never met before. I couldn't make a relationship with anyone, you know. So this was all new to me as well, and I felt that. Yeah, this is wonderful. Then all of a sudden, 4 years, it was like a honeymoon period.
Long
it was
one.
Full of life and vibrant, and it was you probably could say I was on a high, a spiritual high. But then all of a sudden, that all started to wane. So I started to panic, thinking I was going back into my deep depression again, because it felt very like a conversion. Typical symptoms of depression I could relate to, and I thought, oh gee whiz, that was short-lived. But there was something deep down that told me it wasn't, and it was like there was still a calm and a peacefulness, even with the turbulence that was going on in my mind and my thoughts. And then I was introduced to Joan of the Cross in The Dark Night of the Soul, and that was about 26 years ago. And then, to cut a long story short, I became a Carmelite, a secular Carmelite. I left charismatic renewal. I wanted a more contemplative type of way to pray, and I moved to the Carmelite order, and I was there for 5 years. But the Dark Night of the Soul and John's work was the only one that really carried me through my journey. I didn't have any counsellors or any therapy whatsoever. I couldn't afford it. I didn't even know what therapy was in those days. You know, you're back 20 odd years ago.
Yeah. And
I had no physical spiritual direction to talk about either. I did meet a couple of priests and another couple of people, but the Dark Night of the Soul for me ended up being a stripping away of every single concept. It was almost annihilation of everything that I ever believed, the concepts, ideas, notions that I had built up, the image that I had built up about myself had to be stripped away to find out who I really am. And then at the same time, I was introduced to Frank Lake, the psychotherapist, who was a theologian also. And he worked with Emerson, William Emerson worked with him. And they did LSD regression work. And that took them back into the perinatal domain, conception, before conception, all of that. So, and Frank Lake says in his works that there's a place, he calls it the blastocyst, where there's a moment where you're not yet human, but you're still spirit, and it's on the verge of that cusp of becoming a physical being. And that lasts about 6 days before conception and before the implantation in the womb takes place. So it's just that period before it. Yeah. And I thought, yeah, that's fascinating, that's interesting, because that's a part of the soul. It's not been contaminated, it's not been touched, that Meister Eckhart talks about. You know, there's a place in the soul that's never been wounded. Yes. So that registered with me, and I was reading Meister Eckhart. He was a 14th century mystic, and he was against original sin, the concept of original sin, so much so he was excommunicated from the Catholic Church. He believed in original blessing. Okay,
Okay.
so that really appealed to me, that I wasn't contaminated from birth. You know, that all happened because of, like, when the placenta and umbilical cord starts to take place, and all the nutrients flow into the baby. It also, what flows with that is the mum's anxiousness and stress and
Yeah.
insecurities, all of that. So that was the information I was being fed as a physical being, but underneath that still lay my spiritual being that can't be tampered with. So I investigated that over the years and come to the realization that that is the real part of me. So it's a stripping away and learning who I am not to become who I am, which was a spiritual being before a physical being, if that makes sense. And that continues to be an ongoing journey, because John of the Cross talks about the passive night and the active night. What our participation in the active night, what can we do to help the process, be there, present for the process, to allow that stripping? And yeah, it is a painful process, and I wouldn't kid people on and say it's always pleasant and sweet, but there's always a dawn after the dark night. Whereas the life I was living was stagnation, pain of stagnation, not the pain of growth. So I chose the path, the pain of growth at that point, because I knew there was something in it. And I had nothing to lose, really, because I came from such a dark place. I thought, you know what? So that led me on to real research into, like, some of the mystics. And I know that St. Teresa of Avila has had a kind of a re-evaluation, if you like. And if you read closely into the saints' kind of a description of their journeys, you'll very often find horrendous pain or depression or something. It preceded their experience of a spiritual experience.
Yeah.
And what they're now thinking is that the whole perinatal domain is not just a biological event. No. It's a spiritual, it's an interface, if you like, between the individual consciousness and transpersonal consciousness. And it's a gateway forward into life that we're supposed to carry with us, but that gets overshadowed and clouded by programming, cultural programming when we're tiny, and all the negative core beliefs that we have. All of that, we absorb that. And even when you're absorbing the mum and dad's relationship, so if it's a fractious relationship, then that's what you're going to expect from relationships. So it's a stripping all that away to, you know what? I'm not my mum and dad. I am not my trauma. I am separate from that. I'm a unique spiritual being just looking to find my way back. So it's almost like kind of a spiritual homesickness, if you like, that we're hungered, we yearn. We've got a kind of a knowing awareness inside us, an urgent longing, as John of the Cross calls it. There's something more to us than just this physical life, albeit the physical life is a very important one. But that interface at the beginning is supposed to journey with us. So we're supposed to be taught how to be physical human beings, not spiritual human beings, because we're already that. We exist as a spiritual entity. This is what I believe. And I believe that when we become flesh, then it's our mum and dad's job and the wider community to nurture that humanity into life. Now, there was one theologian made a statement, and I think it was during the Second World War. It says, Jesus Christ is human, we're not. And I put on to the end of that quote, yet, because that's what we strive towards. We're learning how to be human beings, not spiritual beings. So that's where I see the journey. My spirituality is already 100% safe. It can't be contaminated. So I'm learning how to be a human being who, and I think the only model I would have is the concept of Jesus Christ: love, kindness, understanding, compassion. All of those qualities make up what it is to be human, fully human. Yeah. Does that make sense?
I'm blown away. I'm blown away by you, Frankie. I am known to be a little bit tearful. I love that. I don't know about you, David. I love that thought that we are already these spiritual beings, and whatever that is, how you think, we are something more than what we present right here. Yeah, science backs up interpersonal biology. You know, there's so much that we are rapidly learning. You've got quantum physics. David and I have these conversations a lot. You've got quantum physics. So however it is that you want to place that, the fact that we are already spiritual beings, we are learning to be physical beings. I did a lot of study about placental transfer, etc., in terms of trauma. So I'm hugely a believer in what you're saying, Frankie. David, you're a bit of a is it Reiki or Reiki? I never know how you pronounce it. I pronounce it Reiki.
Yeah.
Reiki. So, David, I'm going to flip this to you because I kind of saw you going, We know I go, but I saw you doing it.
Yeah, I was looking at it from, I guess, from my point of view. And, you know, Frankie pointed out that those are his views and that's his course, if you like. That's his, that's what he learns about. That's what he's interested in. And I couldn't help picking up on the parallels, you know. Yeah, Reiki does bring you closer to a spiritual being, I guess, almost by accident. I'd get some arguments about that, but, you know, I've had some experiences while practicing and being practiced upon in Reiki. But what really stood out for me and what Frankie was saying about original sin, about the perceptions of different psychotherapy modalities that relate to where we start. For example, you know, you have Freudian theory that believes that we basically all bad to begin with, and you have Rogers, etc., and person-centered doctrines that come from a place where we're all born good. And in the middle, you've got the existentialists that believe we're a blank piece of paper. So what Frankie was saying very much appealed to my my experience and my education in psychotherapy. I lean towards the existentialists, I suppose, in that there is that blank canvas to be drawn upon, and I don't think it's particularly bad or evil to begin with. And that's why I was smiling, and that's why I was nodding.
Frankie, would you mind just because I realise, you know, timings and everything, but Frankie, you didn't start by being able to read in the usual avenues, did you? And my admiration for you, just in what you think about, but your journey into the books that I see behind you was not a straightforward journey.
No.
Do you want to just share a little of that? Because I think it's really important, because so many people out there will do that. No, I can't do it because of experience, of learning, etc. But you did do it, and you did it bloody well.
Well, I have to start off by saying that I'm a very, very lucky, blessed person for the journey that I've had. I wouldn't choose the journey again. Absolutely not. No. But I don't have any regrets of one nanosecond of it for the goodness that I've received from it. And it's only in the surrender to that to, you know, when I was talking about the interface of the two levels of consciousness.
Yeah.
Very often in that stage we get stuck or caught, and that is when the trauma happens. And that is when we split off and become in a defensive mode where we have to protect for survival reasons.
Yeah.
You know, you've done that, you've studied that yourself, Aneesh.
Yeah.
So when I say that because when I come through my kind of a part of the journey, I hungered for academic stuff and intellect and knowledge after that, because I had a huge catch up to do. Because I didn't start, I was illiterate to I was 33. I could write my name. And I remember being in school, and I don't know if you can remember being at school, but when I was at school then, when you sat an exam, you were asked to stand up at the end, and the teacher would read out your name, and you would stand up and he would read out your results in front of everyone. And I remember being in geography, and I stood up and he said, Francis Larkin. I stood up and he said, 1 out of 100. Now, you can imagine the embarrassment and how degrading that was. But my way around that was to be a comedian, you know, and that's why we've got great comedians, because behind the comedian there's fantastic trauma. Yeah. So I just said, oh, sir, what was the 1 for? But he was quicker than me, because he said, for putting your name in the right place, you know. So that's a kind of a background and I was thrown out of class when I was 7. So that carried on right through until I was 30 odd. So when I came to this experience of, we'll call it a conversion experience or enlightenment, whatever you want to call it, I have to say it was love that I felt. It wasn't any words, nothing else. It was a language that can't be spoken, and love can't be spoken. We think we can do love, and we think we're great at it, but really we're not. We only scratch the surface of love, in my opinion, anyway. So it was love that changed me. So I was driven by love, not by academic ability or achievements, but I was very curious, and I felt that, and I did make a prayer when I was in the chronic depression. Look, if I ever get through this, and I did pray. I mean, I have to say, I did pray every morning. My prayer consisted of going to bed off the night shift and crying myself to sleep, and begging to get rid of this unhappiness and depression. And 6 years, six long years, I prayed that prayer, thinking I was not going to get any answer, and gave up. But when I get through that, I wanted to help people, and I thought, I can't help you because I don't have the academic ability. I can't articulate. I don't have the words. I don't have anything except for this knowing inside that it's humanly possible to get through depression, to get through trauma, and to be a semi-whole person again. So I went and did a certificate course in counselling. I started the diploma, and then before I knew it, I felt I had to go to college to do English, because I felt, I need to do a bit of English because I didn't have any at school to catch up. Then I ended up going on to a course called Access to Social Sciences by default, and then I went on to university, which I have to say, there was 4 years of study was a dark night, a constant surrender to my insecurity, my inferiority. I mean, I went to Glasgow Uni and I looked at the building and I was crying inside. I thought, I can't do this. This is too big for me. Absolutely humongous. And that all comes from our cultural status platform, where it shouldn't be like that. People should be running to university, embrace it, enjoy it, because I have to say that I enjoyed the topics of university. I didn't enjoy the culture of it because of my insecurity and fear. So I never got a chance to marinate myself in all that kind of a life. I came home and studied for 12, 14 hours a day, 7 days a week, still just scraped through my course, ended up getting a Bachelor of Divinity degree, and that was all fine. Could I use it? Not at that stage. I went on and did the diploma in clinical and pastoral counselling, did some counselling and moved through that. But everything I've learned has been self-taught. I mean, I sit with books and I'll go through it, but when I started reading John of the Cross, just to give you an example, John of the Cross's collected works are archaic and scholastic language. And I would sit on one page for maybe 2 or 3 days, just jotting down the words I didn't know and then looking up a dictionary. But the downside to that, people who don't have an education, also I was labelled dyslexic, can't use a dictionary because we don't know what letters are in the words that you're looking up. We can't, I mean, there's some words you can look up, but if you take about philosophy or anything that starts with PH, I think it's an F, right? Yeah. So that's how basic the learning was. It was, and then I had my wife who was a school teacher who noticed that I was really, really struggling. Well, before we were married, she noticed I was really struggling. She thought, there's something not right here. Absolutely something behind this. And then I was labelled dyslexic. So they kind of cut me a bit of slack at uni for that in the last year. But yeah, I have to say that language and the way we interact has been a huge, huge dark night or struggle and journey. Yeah, that's probably been my biggest probably practical journey, if you like. Yeah, outward journey. Yeah, to get to the stage I'm at just now. Yeah, and I'm still jotting words down, still using thesauruses and dictionaries. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the whole academic thing, what you're saying, yeah, it's been a struggle.
It's an amazing journey, Frankie. It really is. It sounds, it could have been, I guess, extremely frustrating.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
You wanted the knowledge, but you couldn't get access to it.
Yeah, but you know, the thing behind it, David, it was that was my ego, right? So that was, I'm saying that I might be a bit hard on myself there. A part of it was ego, right? Because I was so in love with God, I wanted to tell everyone about Him, right? So I wanted to stand in the mountaintop and shout this. So I thought, how can I shout if I don't know what I'm shouting about? I need to learn. So in one bit of it was ego. The other bit was me catching up, genuinely catching up with education, to put myself in a place where I could commune with people, interact and be articulate on a level that made sense, and we could have a conversation, because I missed that for 30 odd years. I never had that. I mean, I would go out for a drink and then it would be like, people would be talking about football and I hated football, so I sat in the corner and didn't speak because I didn't know anything about football either. So, but there was a part of me I had to catch up. The other part was ego. And then what I found with the Dark Night is that the stripping away means stripping away of every single thing. Even my need to know God had to be stripped away. And I love Meister Eckhart when he says, I pray God, you rid me of God for the sake of God. Meaning, strip me of all the concepts of God, because God's only a word. I want what's behind that. And John of the Cross says the same. You know, he's got a litany of phrases where, you know, if you want to be all, then open yourself to be nothing. Because you have to let go of everything to be all. I know by not knowing. I do by not doing, as the Tao Te Ching would say, over 2,500 years ago. You know, so it's not new. It's not rocket science, and it's not a new concept that might about stripping away, because. And what I love about John's work, and Trees of Babel is the same, and a lot of the mystics are the same, but I didn't study all the rest of the mystics. I stuck with John because I could relate. John could relate to me, actually. John knew what I needed. Let's put it that. He knew what I needed before I knew what I needed, so I trusted that. And what I like about it is John's got the active night where we take our wee part in it and we do all our rational stuff. We say, oh, yeah, okay, I'll do this and do that. Then all of that has to go. So then it's a passive night of the senses. Then you do the active night of the spirit, where you're active in it, and it's on your intellect, memory and will. So that's about all your baggage, your woundedness, your trauma, everything that's unconscious. And the senses is about the stuff that's on the surface, which John and Teresa would say, yeah, it's all right doing that, but it's not going to get you very far. You need to allow the rest. You need to go deeper. You need to see why you're wounded. You need to see why you're defensive towards another human being. You need to know why you're lashing out or you're burying all these angry feelings. There's something behind that. So John will say, right, okay, we do that. That's the spiritual part. We do that in a spiritual way, actively, and then we take part in that. Then it's all done passively, where we have no way of knowing when it's going to happen, what's going to happen, and our part in that is to stay actively passive. Actively present in that passivity, to know that even if you're feeling nothing, and very often the absence of God is His presence, not guaranteed, but the absence, and that made sense to me because it was turning the world on its head.
Yeah.
You know, my insecurity became my security, if you like. So if I was feeling insecure, I knew I was safe because I was being held, because I was held 20 odd years ago that night with a rescuing hug, and that's what the rescuing hug's about. Yeah, it's a physical thing and it's physiological and the chemicals are flowing and all that, but that's holistic. That's all part of the spiritual journey. It's about balance, yin and yang, there's no right, no wrong, no up, no down, you know, no side, no right, no left. It's all about centered balance, no matter what subject or area we're talking about. And I just feel that for me that's been the journey and continues to be the journey. And that doesn't mean to say I don't get triggered. But that's another area that I feel is important for people as well. I really feel this is paramount on this level. Is like I see a trigger now as a evolutionary opportunity to shift and break links from the past. So if I'm triggered, if I go out this room today and my son triggers me, then I have to draw back from that and say, okay, I'm reacting to that. So what happened when I was his age? When my father was maybe doing that, or my mum was doing that, or some other adult was treating me that way, or responded that way. What is it so there's a gap in my development then. So if I can be there for my son and say, look, and talk it through, I say to myself, well, that's what I didn't have. I didn't have that attachment, that bonded nurturing, that I felt safe enough not to lash out or get defensive, being triggered, and be accepting that someone is here to hold me and help me through this part. So that's all triggers are. They're just wee gaps in our journey that we can go back, we can journey back with a good friend or a companion and say, right, okay, let's go back and pick up the pieces and see, and join this dotted line.
There is so much to say to you, Frankie. So, I mean, gee, I mean, it is, isn't it? And we live in, I was having a conversation the other day, somebody said to me, talking about the biological model and the medical model, and they said, aren't they the same? I said, no, they're not. I said, the biological model is exactly what it is. We are a little box of chemicals and we react to what we experience. I said, a medical model, and I'm not knocking medical models, but in terms of psychology, stop this business of cure. Stop this. You know, I rant about this, but, you know, come away from that. Come into the state of the person. Sit with them. And this, you know, even trauma itself there's an industry that's now attaching itself to it. You know, everybody is trauma informed. What does it mean? You know, what does that actually mean? Well, in actual fact, to be trauma informed means that you create an environment that at your best, you know, you try your best to ensure that somebody isn't re-traumatized. People don't know that in a simple basis. It seems to be, oh, we've got to cure trauma. Well, I don't think that it is about curing trauma. I think it's about supporting somebody in whichever way, and I particularly love yours, Frankie, I genuinely do, but supporting that person to manage their response, to understand their response, which of course will then lessen the responses. But I just want to come away from this cure-all model. Absolutely. Because I don't know what.
It's not a sickness. So why would you want to? You know, the language of trauma is a language that it's a crying out for help. You know, so if someone's angry or upset or in shame and they're using language, then if they can't use language, then that's all they've got. So if you've got a child that's crying in a supermarket wanting something, that's screaming, kicking its feet, it's talking to you. It's trying to do. I'm involved in APA. I don't know if I've said that to you. It's the Association of Pre and Perinatal Health, Association of Health, and we look at we look at how you do therapy on newly born babies or babies in the womb, and you have a dialogue with them, and they don't have to because they can't talk. They're not. I mean, it's when you've got pre-verbal memory and cellular memory, doesn't mean to say it can't be healed just because they can't talk about it. So I'll give you an example of one therapist who was working with a pregnant woman who was carrying the baby, and she went to the doctors, and the doctor went into panic. She said, "Oh no, we need to section you. If the baby doesn't turn, you're going to be sectioned." So the mother panicked, absolutely, as you would. So the last resort was go to this I don't know what her title was, because she was a midwife, but she was also a child baby psychologist. And she said, "Look, tell me what's happened." So she told her. So she said, "Do you mind if I dialogue with your baby?" And she said, "No, not at all." So she started talking. She just introduced herself and said, I'm just going to have a wee chat with you, if that's okay. Always asking for permission. Always asking for permission. Is it okay to talk to you? Right, okay. Well, I'm going to tell you what's happening, and this is the way it is. Your mum went to the doctor. She's very stressed and anxious because you're lying the wrong way for delivery, and we don't want you to be uncomfortable. It has to be that you give your part, and you have to be allowed to do your part. We don't want the doctors coming in and cutting your mum's tummy to lift you out. And if it has to be that way, that's okay too, because it's for emergency and it's for safety. And so she had this wee dialogue, maybe 4 or 5 minutes, and she says, now, if you want, I can help you, she said. So if I ring a bell and you hear a bell, turn your head towards the bell. And you rang the bell, and within 3 minutes, the baby had turned and ready, and she had a normal birth the following day. That's how consciously aware babies are in the womb. They know the language because they hear it every single minute of the day by the mum. So that's what they're picking up. And all the senses and the smell, all of the senses, you know, the sentient being inside is picking all that up. So we shouldn't limit, you know, as William Emerson says, give me a baby, and this is a physical trauma. If you give me a baby, it's a physical trauma. You can solve that. You can take away the pain of that trauma within 12 sessions. Give me an adult who's had the same trauma, and it'll take 2 years, every fortnight for 2 years, because it's so embedded, entrenched, and it's been enveloped in all the stuff that's come after that, all the negative stuff. If you've had and that's just physical trauma, that's not talking about psychological or emotional trauma, you know, or spiritual trauma in the womb, where that bonding hasn't taken place, you know. So so there is a massive connect, and that is the area, you know, as you say, change the world one baby at a time. Really, and I'm a great believer in what you've said, Aneesh, about trauma, getting a healing for it. No. What you have to do is you have to heal your own trauma. And when you work with someone, that radiates, because what it does, what you're doing is your openness creates, for me anyway, creates a space. That interface, what we're talking about, that gateway is for love, not for anything else, not for words, not for to say, oh, do that X, Y, Z. No, none of that. It's to allow the person to tell their story. Yeah. Because why should we assume that when a baby's born, it goes through its life and doesn't get told its story? That's like trying to write a book and don't tell the main character the script. How is it supposed to find their way through the whole story? That's it. Or Shakespeare come up with a play and the main characters don't get told what to say or what to make it up, improvise. That's what babies do. They improvise all the way through as a defence mechanism to survive.
Yeah, and that creates their personality.
And when people, I was talking to someone the other day, and I encouraged her. I said, have you told your daughter this about the birth and about conception and about CAD? No. I said, please tell her in a light-hearted way. Don't make it a massive big analytical topic. Just talk to her and say, you know, I really struggled when I was carrying you. This was going on, my mum died and we were moving house, and she says, so I was really uptight and I felt that it wasn't a good delivery, so I'm just telling you that. And instantly that'll release that child, no matter what age they are. They could be 60, 70, 50, what age, doesn't matter. Because I know for a fact that when I've spoken to mum about my not, but not an unwanted child, and when I spoke to mum about that, everything dissolved. Any negative feelings I had towards my mum dissolved instantly, because she told me why. She was panicked, she was stressed, she was anxious, they had no money, they had social shame, all of that comes into it. So yeah, you're right, it's not an illness.
No, it's really, really not.
No. Well, it is what it is. I don't even like calling it a condition.
No, you know, it's trauma.
It is what it is, and it can be healed, or it can get better. Yeah.
We really have run out of time. So much what you say resonates with me. I am a hypnobirthing practitioner as well, and I am pretty big on what happened to you, what happened to, and I know David, this is your baby too, pardon the pun, but what happened before you, what happened in the generations, etc. Never mind the environment that we're in. And I could go on one of my little rants, but I won't. So I'm going to flip it to you, David, to Frankie, you're amazing. David, I'm going to flip it to you to talk us out, because otherwise I think we're going to be here all day and I've got clients to see later, but you're amazing, Frankie.
Yeah, Frankie, I would park the rest of the day if I could, because this has been fascinating and I'm really, really grateful. It was really insightful and really educational for me. Again, you know, it sounds like I had a much better start in education than you did by a mile. And you write about it being institutionalized, and I felt not, I don't fit in sometimes. So I can't imagine how you felt.
Yeah.
So more power to you, Frankie. It's been great to meet you and great talking to you.
Thank
And
you,
I
David.
hope we get another opportunity. So go well and take care.
Thank you, guys.
No, thank you. And stay safe, everyone.
Yeah, thank you.